All right, so this is going to be another facial harmony of Kelly Oubre. So in this facial harmony, I'm going to break down everything that y'all need to know about Kelly Oubre's. And Kelly Oubre is deemed as one of the most attractive basketball players ever. So let's see if that's true. So his overall facial rating is 6.1, which is 1 in 6 people. All right. His side facial score is 44%. His front facial score is 53%. And these are harmony scores, by the way. His total facial harmony score is 47.8%. So when you combine these two totals together, it's going to be 47.8%. Front facial score is worth more than side facial score, just to let y'all guys know that. Facial dimorphism, so how masculine is the face, is around 4.5. His body fat factors is an 8, and his miscellaneous features is a 9. And these are the rarity scores of some of your favorite celebrities, so you can have an idea. All right, so I'm gonna talk about his overall facial assessments real quick, just to break down, so y'all guys can have an idea of my thoughts about um, you know, me analyzing his face. So let's get to it. So Kelly's mid face ratio is way too compact. Also, his facial width to height ratio (FWHR) is way too compact as well, which gives him a very squished appearance, even though he has a short filtrum and a high set eyebrows, which should give him an overall balanced mid-face. But since his filtrum is short relative to his face, it has an overall compound effect that would probably affect other features like his filtrum to chin ratio being too high. Kelly's side profile was decent, not too many flaws overall. The only problem was his nose, which affected a couple of measurements. The nose was more upturned, the nasal mental angle and the total facial convexity would have more of an steeper slash acute angle. On the other hand, the nasal labial angle plus the nasal facial angle would have the opposite effect and would increase its angle, which will make the relationship ideal between the nose and the chin. So let me just explain this to y'all real quick. So pretty much, his filtrum is too short. So and and what happens is it has a compound effect. So if one thing is wrong with the face, it's going to compound to other things. So other measurements are going to be affected from that, just that one little thing as well. Even though it's supposed to be balanced because his eyebrows are pretty high up across his face. So it should have a balance effect, but it still doesn't because his filtrum is just that short. So that's how big of a flaw his filtrum is to his face. And Kelly's Uber's side facial profile, right? His nose isn't is projected, but it's not projected enough. But the biggest flaw is downturned. All right. So if it was more upturned, um, some other measurements, actually 4 to 5 measurements would be good. So your nose measurements are pretty crucial to the face. So his eye separation ratio is 46%, which is tier one, which is good. Facial thirds, tier three. Um, like I said again, so this time his lower third is pretty dominant at 40%. But even though his lower third is dominant at 40%, um, his forehead takes a lot of the ratio, I mean, less of the ratio, which at 26%, which deviates way far from 33%, which you need to get. So his facial thirds are all over the place, though. The only good facial third is actually the middle. But yeah, his facial thirds are completely all over the place. His canthal tilt is 3.5, which is a tier 3. His facial width to height ratio is a 2.08, which is very compact. It's still a tier two, but it's very compact. It's on the other side of the compactness. His jaw frontal angle is tier three. It's a little bit too wide, even though he has an angular jaw. His cheekbones high settiness is a 60%. It does look like it's a bit high set, but when you compare it to his very compact mid face, it's actually pretty on the lower end of it being set. So if he had a bit of a longer face, that 60% might be closer to 70 or 75, depending on, but right now it's a 60%. So he does have low set cheekbones. Are his begonia width, I have trouble saying it sometimes, is pretty much the jaw width to the cheekbone width, and it's 85%, which is good. That's tier one. His total facial height to width ratio is really good. He has a very good skull shape. Is not too elongated face or not too short. It's just right. His chin to filtering ratio, like I said again, is too high at 2.63%, and the most it can be is 2.55. And yeah, around 2.5 to 2.55, or around 2 to 2.55. I mean, and as you guys can see, you got 2.63, and this is going to compound to other things as well. His neck width is on the lower end. He does need a wider neck. It's more a masculine trait. His mouth to nose width ratio is actually pretty good. Is in the ideal range. Um, his mid face ratio, like I said again, is way too compact, and he does have wide set eyes too. But still, even though he has wide set eyes, his face is just that compact. His mid face is just that compact. Um, his eyebrow settiness, like I said again, it's a bit. He does have wider set eyebrows at 1.5, which is very wide set, and that is a flaw. Eye spacing ratio is pretty good. It's almost near ideal. His eye aspect ratio, he does have almond shaped eyes, which is ideal at 3.6. His lower to upper lip is the same at 1 to 1. It's not a flaw, but it's in the normal range. Deviation from interpupillary eye distance and his jaw frontal angle is at 2, so the deviation is at 2, which means that he has good facial harmony. So that's tier one. His eyebrow tilt is too tilted at 15 degrees, but that's still within the normal range. But it's a little bit too tilted, which gonna make him look like a, which can make you look like a villain almost in a way. For eyes are too tilted. His bitemporal width, which is his forehead width to cheekbones, is at 72. That's a little bit too low. Lower third proportions is really good actually. It's tier one and at 31%, which doesn't deviate too far from 33%. His interlateral angle is 102, which means that his eyes are wide set. Like I just said again, he does have very wide set eyes. All right, so now to the side of his face, which I do want to talk about. His gonial angle is perfect. His nasal frontal angle is perfect. He does have a protrusive brow ridge, as you guys can see. His mandibular plane angle, how steep is his jaw, is only at 14%, which is not steep at all. Even though he has an angular jaw, but just overall, it's just not steep. Um, but it's still within the near ideal. It's just not steep enough. It needs to come down just a little bit more. His ramus to mandible ratio is about 0.52, so that's near the ideal. It's not there yet, but it's very close. If it was zero point 0.6, it would have been ideal, so it's right there. But he doesn't have a lot of jaw body, as y'all guys can see. His facial convexity from the glabella is at 170 degrees, which is perfect. His submental curvical angle is at 123 degrees, which is in the normal range, but it can be better. But he probably has a lot of high hyoid underneath the jaw. So as you guys can see, that line all the way from the mandible right there, compared to that line all the way from the angle that you see on the bottom, all that is high hyoid. So if he didn't have that much hyoid, he would have been in the ideal range for it. I know it's kind of hard to explain, but just work with me. Nasal facial angle is not ideal. And this is what I'm talking about with the nose. It's too downturned, as y'all guys can see. His nasal labial angle is at 5, which is a big flaw. His nose is just way too downturned. Um, his orbital vector is positive, which is good. As y'all guys can see, the bone, he does have a lot of bone support underneath the eyes, which is ideal. The total facial convexity is not ideal. It's too it needs to be more acute. Like I said again, it's because his nose is not protrusive enough and it's too downturned. So he's gonna have more of an obtuse angle, which you do not want to. You want to have more of like 140-ish degree angle. His mental labial angle is not ideal. It's just a slight flaw. If he had more of a protrusive lower lip or more of a protrusive chin, um, he would have got into the ideal range. But it seems like he does. But I think it's just the facial hair. It looks like it has a protrusive chin, but that's not the case. It's just that he has a lot of hair underneath the chin, so it just gives it that illusion. Facial convexity from the nasion It's a tier 4 flaw. Uh, yeah, so it's too acute. So yeah, but if he had more, just more of a projected nose and a higher nasal bridge, it would have not been a flaw. Nasal projection is at 0.44, which is very low. So this nasal projection stemmed with a lot of other measurements, like I said before. So his nose is probably the biggest flaw. 0.76 for the nasal width to height projection, which is actually good. So he does have from width to height is good, but just the projection itself and it being downturned is the biggest flaw. It's Ricketts Elon. So these are lip measurements. So the lips are supposed to be actually behind the line, and as y'all guys can see, it's not behind the line. The H line, the bottom lip is actually supposed to be touching the line, just barely touching, and as y'all guys can see, it goes past the line, which is not ideal. The S line, uh, for the S line, the upper and bottom lip is supposed to barely touch the line, and as you guys can see, it goes past the line again. And the burstal line, same thing, like I said again, and it goes past the line, but is not within the ideal range. And plus you got to understand that his jaw is kind of open a little bit. So if he was to close it, his lower lip might actually probably be past his upper lip anyway. But this is, like I said again, this is stemming from the nasal protrusion. So if he had more nasal protrusion and if it wasn't down swung, I think his lip measurements might be within the ideal range for all of them, in my honest opinion. Nasal mental angle is a 4 at 135, which is a little bit too obtuse. You want the angle to be around 130 degrees, ideally no more than 132, but he's kind of close to it at 135, but that's not within the ideal, but it can get closer to that. His gonion to mouth, as y'all guys can see, the gonion and the mouth region, and I put like two dots right there. Y'all can see kind of like the separation from the ramus, and yeah, so his gonia is way past the mouth region. His recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle, he does not have any jaw recession, which is good. His brow ridge inclination, he does have a lot of um forehead inclination, but he has too much. And you don't want to have too much forehead inclination. So it is a tier 3 flaw, but it's within your normal range. Um Nasal tip angle is not ideal as well. So his nasal tip is too rounded towards the top of the nasal tip. So pretty much for the side angle is the nose that is dropping his score by a lot. And for the front is his filtrum that's dropping his score by a lot. Just for the simple fact that his mid face, you could say a little bit of the cheekbone tight steadiness and the facial width to height ratio as well. So if he had a long filtrum, the mid face would be perfect, and let's see, yeah, the mid face would be perfect, and the facial width to height too. Just from that one particular thing. And another thing too that surprised me, I thought he was gonna get a higher score than a 6.1. I really thought he was gonna get like a 7. But a 6.1 is still really good. It's not model range, but it's still with it's way above average. It's around the top, let's say 15 percentile of people. So if y'all guys think of like, let's say like 100 people in the auditorium, he's gonna be at least top 15%, or the 15 best looking people within